this is something that I think differentiates good and great DMs is the ability to take something that it was unexpectedly added and make it feel like it was there all along.
Hello, friends. Robert Bevan here, author of the Caverns Creatures series of comedy, fantasy novels, and short stories. With me is Sam West, and today is another. No, it's not. Warlock Wednesday's over. Instead, we'll be just talking about some different stuff. Today, we're gonna be I'm gonna be getting Sam's professional dungeon mastery advice about using random tables in your D&D game.
It's not just for DMs. Random tables, like, there are a lot of them, and they're random encounter
Oh,
tables, and they're random item tables, but there's also like a lot of character building stuff that goes with random tables. I
all
think they're
right.
a really useful tool, and
I
I
know
don't use them as much as I should, I think.
offhand, I'm thinking character background attributes, but
Yep.
yeah, I totally ignore those.
Yeah, most people do.
Okay.
So I'm gonna start with like I think the random tables aren't perfect in execution at most tables, in that I don't think it's often wise to sit down and just go, well, whatever the table says, I'm going to live by. That's not really where you want to be with random tables. That's not sort of their point. So I will start there. Like, if you're going to use random tables, you want to go into it with some expectation of variance and some expectation of how do I make whatever random result comes out of this fit to my character, fit to my setting, fit to my whatever. Bob, do you roll on any random tables when you're doing character creation whatsoever?
No,
None
um,
whatsoever.
I don't think so. Not unless there's something specific in there that I'm required to roll. But like I said, the only thing that comes to mind is backgrounds. Is there anything else that I'm missing?
Yes.
What?
Trinkets, my personal favorite. Trinkets are the best tables in D&D. If you haven't played with trinket tables, literally they're just a D100 list of items that are garbage. But you get
Yep.
one of them at random. I have found them to be a deeply rewarding element of backstory building, and I highly recommend, if you haven't rolled on a trinket table before, get your DM, get your party together, be like, all right, let's all roll for random items. Sometimes people start with jars of mayonnaise. Sometimes people start with cryptic lockets with strange portraits drawn in them. Other times people start with like sticks that they found in the woods. They're
Wait,
great. I
wait,
love
slow down,
them.
slow down. Jars of mayonnaise. Is that a real one?
Yes.
How far back does mayonnaise go? I don't know
I
the
don't
history of
know.
mayonnaise.
I do not know. Commenters, let me know what the origins of mayonnaise is.
Like Hellman's?
No, not like Hellman's. It's some kind of fat rendered that's
Okay.
been turned into a some form of condiment, I'd
That,
assume.
that's
But
a,
you
I
can get
mean, that's
you
a
get
great
mayonnaise.
trinket, but you got to use it immediately.
That's true. You also get mayonnaise out of alchemy jugs. That's a real thing that they do. Remember? So like, mayonnaise
Oh yeah,
is
that's
in the
true.
realm of
Yeah,
Dungeons
yeah,
and
yeah.
Dragons.
Okay. A lot more so than I would have expected.
Ample mayonnaise in D&D. I think that
Where's my horseradish? My ketchup.
yeah, you got it. You need to put it on your D&D hot dogs, which are Griffin dogs or Displacer Beast dogs. No, I don't know. What's
Demon
good?
dicks.
What do you think?
Demon dicks.
Sure, Demon Dick Dogs. Let's go with those ones. Just fried Demon Dick Dog. That's the name of this video. Um, it's pure perfect. That's what street food is in hell. What were we talking about?
Mayonnaise.
Great. So like, I would
Trinket.
advocate, if you haven't rolled on background tables when creating a character, specifically for character personality traits, I would do it. We can start this like by talking about what character side of things looks like, which I think is the majority of people. These are the people that like the average person isn't DMing, like a sixth of the people DM, and everyone else is a player, right? So I would advocate, if you are a player, those personality background traits, flaws, people you know, the bonds are really useful background tools, especially for people that don't tend to like do big in-depth backgrounds, don't like to write out their own novel about their character's deep and tragic backstory or their
Well,
upbeat and inspiring or whatever.
see, I don't do all. I mean, I'll write like a paragraph,
Mhm.
but I always have a clear idea of what my character's personality is going to be like, and it feels weird to me to roll for that randomly. Like
This is
well, I mean, I would advocate this sort of thing for somebody that doesn't like it's a shortcut for doing the work of coming up with a character. You know, maybe for a beginner player, just someone that doesn't feel like bothering with doing all that. It's all right. I need a generated personality, and I'll do my best to follow it.
I would actually say it does the exact opposite. So
Okay.
I think most people won't have that hard a time, even if it's the first time picking up this game, developing a character's personality as play goes on, right? When you sit down at the
Yeah.
table and you start playing Dungeons and Dragons, your character's personality usually defaults to silliness in the first few sessions when you're figuring out the bounds of the world and you're pushing the DM's buttons and you're trying to figure out, oh, I am a silly paladin man that has his backstory is as loose as his wife died and now he's out for vengeance. And that's like the whole stop that you started with your character. But then your personality radically shifts and you adapt and eventually you find and land on something that, you know, goes with a couple of jokes and then it kind of sticks you in a position. I think a lot of people can easily grab toward and sort of design a personality. I think the flaws, bonds, personality traits tables are actually better tools in the tool belt of somebody that wants to improve, or not even necessarily improve, add additional variance, add additional excitement, get additional layers of characters they wouldn't normally play and try them out. It gives you opportunities to take the standard personalities that you tend to default to and shake it up a little bit. Rolling on the table will not say this is only what your character's about, but it gives
Right.
you something that your character can care about. It gives you some little quirk that your character has. How that interacts with the other elements that you've come up with, how that interacts with your other personalities, your other personality traits, I should say, is going to be a lot more interesting because of this added variance that you weren't thinking about, this added outside element that you can incorporate as much or as little as you'd like, but will come together to create a whole new entity that's going to be really different than your typical characters tend to be, I think.
That's yeah. I guess it really depends on your table and what kind of game you're playing. Like the ones I play nowadays, like when I'm playing Jorser the Sorcerer, all he does is, you know, make innuendos, and
Yeah,
I don't I don't want him to do anything else besides that. I don't
that's
want him to be
entirely
more
fair.
interesting. He's a weirdo, and that's fine.
So I would also say for someone like George or the Sorcerer, as opposed to doing personality traits, it might still be valuable at tables to have him roll for background, or not necessarily background, for bonds, to have other NPCs exist in the world that care about him or he cares about in some way, shape, or form. Care about even be the right word. Knows about might be the right word. Because what it does is it takes these characters that are full of high volatility, full of just they're one note sort of gimmick characters that you enjoy playing because the joke is fun, the joke is enjoyable, the table's having a good time with it, right? And it gives them an actual buy-in that gives them reason to be there. And it gives everyone else reason to keep putting up with them in some cases, right? Because this character knows a guy, because this character has this person here or there that has some kind of element to the plot. So even the most outlandish, ridiculous, silly characters can still be attached to a larger narrative, even if it's in a simple, like really superficial fashion. It's still really useful for those kinds of characters. And it also does all the work for you if you wanted to. You can just be like, roll on this table. I know this person, DM, here you go. And they just go, great, we can incorporate that in. This will be your next plot hook. Now, Jorcerer, the normal comic relief, has an actual in that makes him an important character in the next plot, even while he's just making your mom's and sperm jokes the whole time, right?
I will say that would be an interesting exercise to try.
I think it'll make a lot of people have newfound enjoyment in characters they've been playing for a while. And I think that's
Yeah.
what these tables tend to excel at. It's offering you opportunities to look at what you've got and just make a subtle change to it that can give you a new life to something, give a little bit of new excitement into something you've been doing for a while. That's what I largely think about player background driven tables for variance and randomness. If you don't roll on them, I highly recommend rolling on them. You don't have to roll on all of them. You don't have to roll on most of them. You can, but like pick and choose. Be like, I want this character to do this thing. I want this character to be all about like. So my friend Sarah played a character named Paula Dean the Paladin. And the whole shtick was it was the most paladin that ever paladin, and that she was deeply communist. That was the whole character gimmick. She didn't want to roll any kind of personality traits. She knew what she was about, but having bonds, having unique little quirky flaws that were unrelated becomes suddenly interesting. Getting a random phobia is kind of a fun little wrench that adds a third dimension to a character that otherwise is kind of flat and gives you more opportunities to shake up how you're playing at the table, gives you more reasons and buy-ins for your character to feel about something, to want to contribute and think about something beyond just this doesn't directly benefit me, and that's why I don't really care about it, which is oftentimes a thing that players can fall into, which is, I don't know why my character is here and how the circumstance benefits them. I don't know how my character would feel about whatever environment we're in. I guess I'm just going to keep going along with it and roll my eyes a little bit. These tables help with that.
All right, let me ask you this. Have you ever been at a table where they rolled in these random characteristics kind of table things, and they came up with a quirk, and that turned out to be really annoying over time?
Normally, I have found that if a quirk is annoying, it is quickly forgotten about. Because the nice thing
Okay.
about these is they're entirely they're as buy-in as you'd like. I have found more instances where players come up with a stupid quirk that they won't let go of on their own because they came up with it, and everyone gets really irritated with them after 2 or 3 sessions of it. That happens a lot more in my experience than rolling a crappy quirk. Namely, because I also just don't think Wizards makes like the pre-made tables don't really include super obnoxious quirks. There aren't ones that like you're
Oh
afraid to
no, I'm
shake
not.
hands or
Yeah,
hypergermophobic or
yeah.
anything to that effect, which can be like there aren't debilitating quirks on these quirk tables or on these flaw
No,
tables
I
for the
was
most
just
part.
talking more about obnoxious people that just take one of these and go off the deep end with it.
I think you're more likely to find the people that go off the deep end with these things do it on their own idea. They'll
Yeah.
be like, I
Okay.
am playing Naruto, and I will play exactly and only Naruto, and we are actually going to be moving from Dungeons and Dragons into the realm of Naruto because that's my character's identity. I've experienced players like that before, where they just hone in and drive on one core idea and will not let it go, and it has nothing to do with roll tables. Roll tables, I don't see tend to have that issue. Normally, it's you take a little sprinkling, some inspiration of it, you tune it
Yeah.
to as much as you like. Maybe it's, oh, I've used it too much this session, someone clearly got annoyed, dials it back next session, it comes into play only here and there. That's where I find that they end up landing and end up being a huge net positive for making characters that feel more alive.
And and even if you start with these characteristics, you can shed them over time, huh?
You sure can. You can
Okay,
forget
good.
about them. People forget
All right.
about things in D&D all the time. I have played
Yeah.
characters with accents for 4 consecutive sessions and then abruptly stop and no one gives a crap because it's D&D.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's a thing that you're going to adjust these characters on the fly. They're not going to be consistent. This isn't a professional novel. This isn't a movie. This is you ultimately creating a story with some friends, and whatever services the story best at the moment is often what you should be doing. Sometimes that means getting rid of a quirk that doesn't service your character anymore.
All right. I'm feeling better about it now.
These are not like you have to abide by the random table rules. In fact, don't
Okay,
do that.
good.
That's not
Because
where you want to be.
some of them are kind of lame.
Sure. And then what you do is you roll again. If you don't like it, you can use these tables however you'd like. They're a tool in your tool belt, not a strict guide or a strict game rule that you must roll exactly once and you are stuck with this for the rest of time and you have to role play exactly to this fashion or you're going to lose your powers. This isn't like being a paladin in 3rd edition. This is an actual tool that you have that's job first and foremost is to inspire you to come up with cool ideas that can shake up and change how you would want to present your character.
All right. I like what you said there about rolling again, right? Because on one hand you could just choose from the table, choose from a different table, whatever,
Yeah,
or you roll and you're stuck with whatever you roll. But I feel like rolling again gives you the freedom to veto something, but then you find something that you wouldn't have picked, but you'd recognize there's a little bit of challenge there that you
exactly.
you might enjoy. Okay.
And I mean, this will vary person to person, right? I have had really fun games that have had bizarre kinds of challenges with variance. So a way that I played in a game, every single player at the table rolled down their stats 3d6 key. That was your stat array, and it was in order. After you rolled, you got to pick the rest of your things. You got to do your build however you wanted. I ended up with a character with 6 con. And I played one of the most unique characters I've ever built, which was a wildfire druid whose whole objective was to literally never get hit because his tiny little gnomish body would fold in half from a loose arrow. He was level like 10 and had less than 30 hit points. Like,
Wow.
incredibly frail. This is the kind of character that cannot take hits. So use Wildfire Spirit to stay out of danger, use a lot of obscuring mists and smokes and things like that to hide. It was a really cool character concept that was spurred by variance, that was spurred by some amount of abiding by strict variance. But that character could only exist because I also could incorporate and work with that variance idea. The only reason
Yeah.
that character could work is because I took the given randomness and sculpted it in a way that I found interesting. And that goes for literally every random table you can play with in D&D.
All right.
On the DM side of things, um,
Yes.
there's a lot more interesting stuff. mainly because the game balance is kind of a hot mess. So like random tables from a DM's perspective are a whole different beast than on the player's perspective. Do you like do DMs that run games for you use random encounters anymore? Are there still like
I
roll
don't
to see if the bugbears ambush you in the night?
I don't think so. I haven't actually played at a physical table in a long, long time. So I don't know what the DM's doing on the other side of the screen.
Mhm.
But I expect he's not using random encounters. I think he plans out what we're going to encounter ahead of time. Um, However, I always say I'm not a very experienced DM, not at all in 5e, but way back in my younger days when I was playing second edition and stuff, that I used to DM from time to time. And tell you what, some of my favorite parts of the game were prep when I'm just rolling on the random encounter tables and yeah, seeing what turns up. Then by the time we got to the game, it was like, this is much less satisfying.
But I mean,
But and
there's
rolling treasure stuff too, that was always fun.
I always conceptualize D&D as kind of three games and not one game because this character building is a game of its own where
Mm.
you're like, oh, how can I get a build that does these kind of things optimally? And the combat system, there is the actual playing of the game, which is, the two other mini games coming together in some kind of large social event. And then there's the prep game, which is the DM world building, coming up with encounters and tinkering and tweaking their world narrative and plot and injecting items in here or there. These kind of tables definitely really only belong in the DM prep game, like you said, like in
Mm.
the I want to build my own adventures kind of deal. I really don't know how useful they are as far as like, all right, everybody, we're traveling. I have this table pulled up, roll on the random encounter table and see what happens. Doesn't mean you can't do it. I just think that era's kind of been left. We're no longer in the world that is using the all right, this third encounter is a random encounter with the roll for it to see if one happens. Up, one doesn't happen, we keep moving.
That's
Normally DMs
bringing back memories, Sam.
yeah, exactly. It's the way things used to be, and they are different now. That doesn't mean that
Mm.
we should like throw out the idea of random encounter tables, though. I actually think they're really, really useful as a DM. Specifically, they're really useful for whenever the pace of an adventure is going very differently than I thought it was going to go.
Hmm.
So, in a lot of cases, when I will want random encounters, whatever I will go, I don't know what to put here, but I need there to be something because we have 2 hours left, and that encounter should take that's a social encounter. It should take like 15 minutes. I need something for these players to do for some amount of this time. That's what I want a random encounter table for, right? It's we have planned to play along this much time. There's no shot we're going to be able to go into this dungeon, this adventure, and start things. We're going to be caught in the middle of it because I know someone has to leave by 9. I'll try and get a smaller random encounter done first. And what random encounter tables tend to be really good at is showcasing monsters that I would never run otherwise. And that's where I really like them. They can kind of highlight what is that thing? I'm gonna see what this is real quick. Hold on, team. And you flip in the monster menu, you'll find it. You go, oh, it looks cool. Slam that in there, run it like that. You can get a lot more variance in your games using random encounter tables like that, where you pick from them as opposed to actually rolling on them.
Well, you're talking about like on the fly during the game.
Yes.
All right, yeah, but if you're using them in prep though,
Oh,
what
normally
kind
what
of
I would like if I should say, I would want in prep to have some encounters in my back pocket. And
yeah,
that's where
that's what I'm
these come
talking about.
in,
Yeah,
right? I would look through these tables, I'd be like, these are cool ideas for encounters that fit what I'm working with. I will have one or two of these set aside, and then whenever some amount of time allotment doesn't occur, I can go, great, I can slot this encounter in here, no problem, and have
right.
a neat little social encounter, a neat little combat encounter. The hag shows up out of nowhere, someone's disguised as someone else, and there's doppelgangers, and there's a big kerfuffle in the local tavern. That kind of stuff all can happen with
Or
prepping random encounters that you just looked through, as opposed to like
right.
actually sitting down and rolling.
I know the players are going to have a 3-hour trek through the desert. If they have an encounter, let's see what they'll get. Roll. Now that looks like shit. Roll again. That could be interesting. Back pocket.
Yeah, absolutely. That's
Yeah.
literally a really easy way to go about it. Finding those random encounter tables isn't necessarily easy, although there are some now on the Caverns Creatures website. You can go take a look. I made a whole bunch of them based off of varying variants you can go through. And
All right.
one of the biggest
Now
problems sorry?
I say a lot. I'll try to remember to link that in the description below. But this one, that's what this video is about. They will be linked. You have the Robert Bevan guarantee.
Excellent. I will say that random encounter balance can't account for anything because it doesn't know who's rolling on it. So the way I tiered them was there's low tier encounters, there's mid tier encounters, and there's upper tier encounters. The upper tier encounters, for example, for urban, one of them is the Trask. The other one is 2 CR11 trolls. So like the variance in how challenging an encounter is going to be, even within the given tiers, is very wide. So these again are a resource that you use with a grain of salt. If you do want to roll on them randomly, I will say there can be some awesome opportunities there. For someone that really likes improv, for someone that really likes running with, cool, unique ideas and wants to spice up their game and, maybe doesn't want to do as much prep, you can use these tables as adventure inspiration where you just sit down and go, okay, well, I need something to do. My party's in the Arctic. These two people are out for this week. We need a kind of adventure in the meantime. Roll twice in the random encounter tables. Those two encounters are happening. And then you just figure out how to piece them together on your.
Yes, that takes somebody with a great deal more skill than I have. That's why I don't DM.
Improving is one of the most important elements of DMing, and I think random counter tables honestly force you to do it more than just improving on your own, because they ask you to quickly identify not just like what these monsters are, but how to use them effectively, what kind of environments they should be in, what kind of situations should they be in. You're going to have to do a little bit more work, honestly, within a random encounter table from a thinking on the fly perspective than you would even just coming up with your own encounter in the moment. So, like, this definitely isn't the kind of. I wouldn't recommend this for people that are less comfortable with improvisation, less comfortable with thinking on their feet as a DM, people that are learning it for the first time. Random encounter tables can have value for inspiration still. Physically rolling on them and sculpting adventures on the fly using them, that's the kind of thing you do when you've practiced a little while. Once you are more comfortable with a wide variety of monsters, figuring out what their niches are, figuring out what's an appropriate challenge for the players given this batch of things.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Now I'm looking over the actual article you wrote, which will also be linked. Robert Bevan guarantee. You have 5 specific tips here that you've covered these all like a little bit, but do you want to go through them one by one?
Sure. So the 5 tips that I used for using random tables like a pro, the idea is like you've got random tables, what do you do with them?
Yeah.
These are, I think, if you have these 5 things in mind whenever you're rolling on any random table or considering rolling on a random table, you should have a pretty good handle on what to do with it, how these outcomes will shape your game, how much weight to put it in, stuff like that. So tip number 5 I have is know when to roll. This is, you have to know, is adding variance to this element of my thing good or bad? So if we look at George the Sorcerer as the example, adding variance to his personality, bad. You know what you want him to be. You're happy with him the way that he is. You want him to be a joke machine. And that's what he does. That's what you're happy with him for. So you don't want to roll there. Where you might want to roll instead is ways to incorporate him into the game. You don't necessarily have a great way necessarily to tie him to specific characters, tie him to specific events in the world. Maybe it could be useful to roll to see where he fits in the world. Similarly, whenever you're crafting adventures, it's the kind of thing where you go, I don't know what we're going to be doing next, but we need something to fill this space. That could be a good time to roll on a random encounter table. Alternatively, if you're very pressed for time, you're going to want to plow through the random encounter or not have one at all, more likely, so you can get to the things that you prepped. So you can say, I have to, respect my friend's time. We are all here to play Dungeons and Dragons, but I don't want to space this thing out with a long random encounter that might change the vibe, change sort of the atmosphere. If you're running into a crypt with a bunch of undead and they've had one undead encounter, dropping a dusk mantle on them with some goblinoids, that is going to be a pretty large shift if the goal is to sort of paint this evil undead lich overlord as the baddie. You're going to be kind of pulling away from the atmosphere you're looking for by including random encounter there. Whereas instead, if you're going through the desert and the whole idea is this big unknown space, they're trekking out there for the first time, they're explorers or whatever, that's a perfect place to have something unexpected, something with high variance pop up to start shaping this environment as a wild, unpredictable space.
Yeah.
All right. Do you have any thoughts as to when to roll?
No, you pretty much covered all the bases. I had thoughts while you were talking, but then you pretty much said them.
Solid. Tip number 4 I briefly cover is font of inspiration. This is what we definitely talked about in most of this video.
Yeah.
The random encounter tables aren't a hard and fast rule. They're an idea. They're something that you can spur, something that spurs imagination. If you're rolling on a random encounter table, for example, at a dungeon, you get a gibbering mouther. What the gibbering mouther is doing is entirely up to you. It might just be the party opens the door, turns, goes and attacks them. That's fine. You can have a gibbering mouther like that. Alternatively, you could have a gibbering mouther that's like aimlessly looking up in the corner of the ceiling, like lulling back and forth, and you can kind of pick how you want that to look based on what you need, which goes into tip number 3, which is changing the final
Well,
result to taste.
all right. Well, I mean, I was also thinking for characters, you roll on the your little characteristics charts, your personality traits, and then you've got something like you hurt somebody in the past, and yeah, font of inspiration there. That you got a whole branch of a backstory to build just from that. Who did you
Oh
hurt?
yeah,
What did you do? How is this? Are you searching for that person? Are you looking for redemption? What's going on?
and I really want to make it also clear how much you invest in that is entirely up
Yeah,
to you. Right? You might just be the kind of person that sits down and goes, I need a character backstory. Well, I want to have some kind of interesting character, but I have no desire to write a damn thing. Roll 4 times, call it a day. And that can be more than enough that as you play, you can develop as much as you feel comfortable, as much as you want to. But if you alternatively really like to have a writing prompt, basically, this can be that. Most of the background traits are left very vague on purpose. So
yeah.
so yeah, this comes right around to changing the final result to taste, right? Like this is you get an outcome, you augment that outcome even in ways where it's like, well, in your example, I hurt somebody in my past. Physically, emotionally, how did you physically hurt
Mhm.
them? Did you physically hurt them? Better yet, maybe you didn't physically hurt a person, but you hurt a group. And now we're sort of changing the prompt even more so than just sort of using it as an inspiration, as a jumping off point, a continuation. We're saying, I like some of the words here, and it kind of gave me an idea. I'm going to change this to be more of what I want. Kind of in the
Right.
same way of, you roll on a random monster encounter table, you rolled 2d6 goblins plus 2. You go, well, my party's level 2. There's 4 of them. 8 goblins will house them. Nope, we're changing these final results to better match what the party's able to expect. They're able to go in and fight effectively. Uh, Moving right along, these two kind of go hand in hand. I have tip number 2, which is prepare environments, not monsters. This is specifically referencing random encounters.
Yeah.
And this one we haven't really touched on all of the video, but the gist of this is if you want to use random encounters, and you want to actually roll on the tables. You want to be able to say, okay, we're in a dungeon. I know they're going to be going through this. I want to add some variance. I want to show like this undead dungeon has a wide variety of undead. You want to roll on an undead table. Prepare whatever environment you want the encounter to take place in, and it becomes really easy to slot in almost any monster that you get. It's a way that you can use prep to sort of manage all kinds of random encounters by having what's the encounter's objective? What does the space hold? How is this space going to be affected by the players first and foremost? And then whatever monsters come in can be sort of a secondary factor. Are they protecting something? Are they looking for something? Are they kill or be killed? How can you then sculpt an environment that's interesting so that monsters can use basic things like pushes, fly speeds, cover to make a more dynamic fight agnostic of what you roll? It's if you want to prep random encounters, prep the environment, don't prep the encounters or the creatures is my recommendation here.
Um, yeah, I want to bring this up while I'm thinking about it, so I don't forget later. We've primarily been focused about random encounters and character generation. How do you feel about like is treasure a different video?
No, I just random treasure is very close to random encounters in that you're tailoring them to players still at the end of the day, right? And I think of all of the random tables, random treasure is the most useless because most of the time it is X amount of gold of art objects or a set of magic
Yeah,
items.
I'm talking about
And
magic items specifically.
in the world of magic items, as a DM, I have a very hard time rolling whenever the variance between magic items is a +1 to hit and damage, or an otherworldly portal that creates an atomic bomb, right? Like these two, like that's a portable hole and a bag of holding, right? Like you have tools of mass destruction in the hands of players a lot of the time using these kinds of magic items. I have a very hard time allowing for full variance in that case. Still for
Yeah,
inspiration, they're fine. Still for being like, oh, I need some items to throw together in with this, I have got a dwarven forge that the players are raiding or whatever. Rolling as to what items would be there will not necessarily give you great outcomes because the variance magic item is very high, but rolling as inspiration to say, okay, what can I put in here? What do these tables ideas give me for these are fire related magic items, basically? That I have a lot more use for as a DM.
All right. Well, one tip I'll give, I'm sure it's obvious to most people, but this is a mistake I made a lot, like I said, in my younger years as a DM. Like when all right, the party is gonna fight a bunch of ogres. All right, you killed all the ogres. Congratulations. Oh, and they had a +2 great axe. Why didn't they use that? Oops. Uh, reasons.
Yeah.
If
I do think,
yeah, if you're gonna have magic items in there, make sure the group is using them.
or if the group isn't using them, there's a reason why they're not using them.
Yeah,
Maybe it's cursed. Maybe it, physically doesn't know it's a magic weapon and it's just used to using its big old dumb club. Maybe it's not proficient in
yeah.
it or something. There can be reasons why you wouldn't use a magic weapon of some nature.
Right.
But I
But
do
it
generally
was
agree that,
always
like,
negligence on my part.
oh sure. Um, Most of the time, if I'm doing some kind of variance, again, having a planned environment, you then want to stick items in specific places. So like it's really hard for me to prep or to even use, I should say, random items beyond like gold quantities. And at that point, I just could not be asked. So I'm just gonna use whatever the static DMG numbers tell me because the gold system isn't great anyway.
Well, I think there's font of inspiration there, though.
Yeah, that's where I think it has any amount of value.
Yeah.
The
All
final
right.
big
Well, I didn't
tip,
mean to derail you too much. Yeah, go on to your final tip.
no problem. This is, I think, the hardest tip to use effectively, but it is, I think, the most powerful. It is whenever you roll on a random table, tie whatever the result is in a meaningful fashion to the larger story, to the larger game. This is something that I think differentiates good and great DMs is the ability to take something that it was unexpectedly added and make it feel like it was there all along. It is the kind of thing where you roll on a table, you were trying to get some ideas, and you found some ideas as a DM behind the screen as to, okay, the example I give, there's a Knoll encounter. They're raiding a farmstead, right? While the players are on their quest across the landscape to go find some MacGuffin, right, in the middle
Yeah.
of the mountains. A good DM will run the Knoll encounter. It'll be fun. They'll set up the battle map for it ahead of time. They'll roll, be like, oh, we got Knolls. Okay, sweet. Throw the Knolls in there. Players go and fight them. Cool, fun encounter, whatever. It ends. The players move on with their life. The Knolls are entirely forgotten. A great DM will look at the Knoll encounter and go, why are these Knolls there? And more importantly, how will these Knolls come into play later? Because this will add layers where the players feel rewarded for paying attention, will feel
Yeah.
rewarded for looting the monster, will feel rewarded for noticing that one of the Knolls had a really bizarre black tattoo kind of eye, like claw mark over its right eye. And you can see a little bit more of these base level concepts as far as their organization, who they work for, why they're doing it, can tie into larger underground plot, can tie into reoccurring villains, can tie into future elements of the game where the players will go into them and go, oh my goodness, we fought those guys 3 sessions ago and they're back. And then that will tie into other random encounters, and you can start tying more and more of these little loose plot threads together.
Yeah, and
It's
then
hard.
they can have names and they real characters.
Sure, they can be, yeah, absolutely. Especially if one's escaped and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Doing this on the fly is really difficult, and doing this and being willing to forgo other things you had planned, other ideas you had for the narrative to better favor what variants added into the game that the players found interesting is a really useful skill to have. There's a general creative term that's killing your babies, right? It's the idea of you have to understand that even some of your favorite ideas aren't good ones, or even if they're not good ones, you have better ones. You have to choose to like stifle those and use the random new stuff sometimes that's preferable.
Yeah.
This is an exact method of doing that, right? Is saying these are new cool ideas. I should incorporate these into the story in a larger sense because the players should like it, because the players will engage with it, or because there's opportunity to grow and sort of develop the variants that added and shook up this game into a more interesting story in the long term. It's definitely a
Murder your
complex topic, but
murder your darlings is I
that's
think
the
the phrase.
saying.
Yeah. All
Yes,
right. Kill your
murder your
babies.
darlings. Same thing.
Love it.
Yeah, murder your
No,
darlings. You got me.
I'm familiar with this. Not so much as a dungeon master, but as a writer, as the author of the Caverns and Creatures series of comedy, fantasy novels, and short stories. Yes, there have been things that I just pulled out of my ass one day, and like struggling to come up with something to write, and then later on that becomes a major plot point or character. Yeah.
And people, I'm sure, love it. Like, there are huge
Hope
things
so.
that you come up with entirely out of nowhere that people really get attached to. If you as a DM out there have ever been like, I introduced a stupid NPC named Florb and my players won't let him go, that's exactly what I'm talking about. And incorporating Florb into a larger narrative, Florb gets kidnapped. Florb goes on a vacation. You know, it's Greeking the birdies, but Florb has been killed. That all can be a really exciting way for players to engage with the game more, based off of your willingness to accept and incorporate the variance and the randomness into your overall story.
All right. That was all your tips, right?
That's all 5.
All right, great. Well, that should do it for now. That was random tables. How to use them, when to use them, why to use them. Good stuff. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, everyone, for watching. And let us know what you think down in the comments below. Tell us some stories. Tell us your opinions. Whatever. Yeah, like, subscribe. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.